5 starts on page 165. Notice how to test and debug ASP.NET apps. Some of it just makes sense. It's just common sense, in other words. You know, there's a debugger inside. All right, we looked a little bit at the debugger back in the .NET class. We'll look at it a little bit more, but I want to talk mostly about the trace feature that's available in here. The author says here on 166, well, you should test your site on a lot of different browsers. You know, that should just make sense. We've talked about that before. We also got on here and notice when we right mouse click in here that there is somewhere in here there is a setting where we can change our browser width. There we go. So we can pick any of these. You can go and add another browser if you need to do so, or whatever. All right, so I'm just going to cancel, but those are the ones the author says you should be running it in Firefox, Google, all right, IE, and Opera at a minimum. All right. I think I told you this before, but just in case I didn't, you know, when you run the program, so if I come through here and I run the program right now, notice in my web config file, my thing here says debug equal true. Everybody see that? If I go back and manually change that equal to false, all right, I'm doing that on purpose. So I'm going back and doing that, and then I'm going back to my page here and I run it, I get that message. So whenever in web config the debug is set to false, it's going to always ask you that. If you click what's checked, all right, if I say modify it, then it'll automatically change it back for me to true. If I want to run it without debugging, I just click right there. It'll still run. All right, it still looks the same, so there's really no difference. All right, and that's explained on 168 and 169. I don't think there's anything we haven't already talked about. Okay. All right. Again, something that we've talked about before. Everybody should get this. Here's our code, right? That's the code for the program. So there's nothing new in there. That's just, this is the book's code. But again, if I come through here and I type in this, int x equals 0. Okay, I just want an x. Oops. Int y equals 0. Int z equals x divided, whoops, doesn't matter which one really, x divided by y. Would you all agree that's going to give me an error? Because I'm attempting right there to do something I shouldn't be doing. I'm attempting to divide by 0. All right, I purposely want to introduce an error in here. All right, so I'm going to run the program. Okay. What it does is it comes up and it shows me this. It tries to tell me, hey, you know, you got something in here that I didn't understand. All right, that's not, I mean, right there, that's a pretty darn good explanation. Attempted to divide by 0. All right, but sometimes when you try to do things and the program's running, instead of getting something that looks like that, you'll get something that looks like this. You may have seen this already too. That's called the exception assistant. And what it is it's saying you've got some kind of exception. You didn't put this in a try-catch block, so you have no way of handling the code right now. All right? So the program is basically telling you, I'm about to blow up, but I'm about to blow up for this reason. All right? So sometimes you get what I showed you before, depending on the severity of the error, and sometimes you get something that looks like this. So again, this is shown in the book and described on 171. There's really not any more to it, though, just so you know. All right. Now, if I go back to my program where it did blow up, and I want to close this, I want to get rid of all that junk because, of course, we don't want it in there. And because this is me, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to run the program again just to make sure I didn't break anything. Yep, everything looks fine. Clear works, good. All right. So, now do you realize that when I close that browser window, when you look on the screen right now, the program's still running? You may have noticed that, you may not have. All right. And the bad thing is, what Visual Studio will let you do is do some stuff while it's still in that mode, and it won't let you do other things. Technically, right now, you stopped. You're not in debug mode anymore. Technically, right now, you're in break mode. All right. Is that right? Did you hear that? If you use IE and you close it, it'll actually totally close you. All right. Hard to believe that Microsoft would do that with a Microsoft product and not with non-Microsoft products. So, all right. But if you click break all, or if you click up here, I guess it's up here, then it'll break out. All right. Now, one thing you may or may not have been aware of, and I've used it before, but not very often because I can't think of a great reason to use it. But if I go over here to design mode, everybody sees what's on the screen. Nothing big there. If I right mouse click on the name of my project right here, if I right mouse click on it, and now I choose View in Page Inspector, you see that right near the middle? I'm going to click there. So it's going to bring up another window here. And notice if I take my mouse and I click here, just click right there, what it's going to show me eventually down here is the CSS that made that happen. See what I'm saying? So what it's kind of like combining design and source at the same time. But it's specific because you're able to click your way around and it'll show you basically where you are. It looks like for whatever reason it's not right now, but go to inspect, it should. All right. There you go. There's monthly investment. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like going into Firebug or something else. Now, you don't ever have to use it, but it's another thing that's there if you want it. And you can tell because it says you're in Page Inspector mode. You just click the X and you get out of it. If you didn't like my explanation, you can look on 172 and 173 in the book because they're shown there. All right. If I go into my source file, everybody knows that, right, that this gray area here, that's the gutter. All right. And if I want, I can click right there. Now I put a breakpoint right there. So I can run the program again. But now as it gets through, it's going to look a little bit different because now I'm again. All right. I'm in debug mode, and I can tell it, yeah, I want it to continue. And there's a lot of ways I can do that. I can step through that one line at a time. So if for some goofy reason, I can't think of why this would or could even happen, but if for some goofy reason, when I go through here, this isn't being filled up correctly, let's say, I could put a breakpoint there and I could step through it a line at a time to make sure that stuff is happening correct. And under debug, so I can step into, which will step through it line by line. Now, this isn't bad because you'll notice that it's going from 50 to 500 by 50, right? All right. Well, if I left that off and I just said I++, it'd be going through it 495 times, right? I probably wouldn't want to keep hitting the key to step it into it like that. So in that case, if I want to, I can step over it, which says, hey, run that whole loop and get me out. So step into literally will run a line at a time. All right. Step over, you typically use more with loops because it'll get you over that. All right. And notice, if I'm over here, this is how I toggle a breakpoint. But you can also do it by going over to debug and toggle breakpoint, so you can do that either way. That's shown in the book. All right. If you don't like breakpoints, there's also a feature that's fairly new into Visual Studio on 176, and that feature is referred to not as breakpoints, but they are called trace points. And as it says, a trace point is a special type of breakpoint that performs an action when it's encountered. So typically the reason that you'd set a trace point as opposed to a breakpoint is when it stops there, you want it to bring up a window full of information about where you currently are. And again, that's shown in the book here on page 177. I don't use them. Maybe I should. But if you want more about it and you want to become an expert a lot more than the 30 seconds you just got, take a look on 176 and 177 in your book. Again, the stuff in break mode that I'd already mentioned to you, step over, etc., all that's in your book on page 179. It's shown pictorially right there and in chart form. Now, what's nice about this is not only can you set breakpoints, you can set what are called watches. All right? And I may or may not have talked to you about this before. I'd probably be the only one who would have. But if you look up on your screen right now, that's just the Intellisense. So if you highlight something, it's going to do what it can to show you information. But sometimes that's not enough. So what you want to do is you want to work with a locals window and an immediate window. The difference between these, just so you know, there's a locals window and a watch window. The locals window is designed to work inside of just a routine, so inside of a function. The watch window is more global, it's program-wide. All right, but you can put watches on variables, and as your program's running, you can go up and you can check out the value of variables as the program's running. You can even reset it in the watch window and the locals window. So there's some kind of neat stuff you can do. Also, and again, if you didn't see this before, it's on me for having not shown you rather. This window that's down here, that's your immediate window down in here, and right now I can't do anything with it, but I should be able to as the program runs. It's not showing it to me, but with the immediate window, what you can use it for, if you want to, what you can use it for is kind of a, for lack of better words, a scratch pad. What's that? Yeah, it's in here, but I don't know if it was in there before. So I like, for example, I can type in this print. All right, it says it cannot be evaluated while I'm in run mode, so I'm still in run mode. But there are certain things that you can do in there. You can use it as a scratch pad. Most people kind of use it as a calculator while your program's running. All right? Because you know, for instance, if you remember my code from chapter 2, I didn't get the right answer. When I put in 10 years and 6%, it gave me 6,030 because I've got a mistake in my code someplace. That's how I should go back and debug it. Now, the one thing that's new, and it's the last 4 pages, that's all that's left in this chapter, all right, is I want to show you something. If you don't mind just looking on screen here for a second, if I go back to my ASPX file that's right here and I go to source mode, we talked about this stuff in here a little bit, all right, oops, but I'm putting all the stuff that you see here on different lines just so you see it, and there's a reason I'm doing that. Pretty it up. I'm going to add one more of these. I'm going to say trace equals true. All right, I'm not going to do anything else but say trace equal true. All right, I'll leave all the rest of it pretty much looking the way it is again. So do a file, and I want to save my ASPX file. Yeah, whatever. And no. Why are you giving me that now? Sure. Whatever. I hope I didn't screw it up. If I did, it's no biggie. All right, but I'm going to run the program again. You go, it doesn't look any different. It's going to look different. See that? What it's showing you on the bottom as you're going through, that's all the different phases that your program is going through. As I mentioned last time, when you go through init and load and render and pre-render, etc., it's showing you all that. So why would you care? Well, if you're getting some quirky error and you can't figure out what the error is, what you're able to do is inside of here, you can write what are called custom messages. And they show you an example of this on 185. All right, so what do I have to do? Well, I have to stop the run first of all. All right, so I have to stop the run. Okay, boom, it stopped. I want to go into my C# file, and I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe it matters where I do this, but I'm going to stick it in I'll stick it in page load anyway. And I say if trace dot is enabled, and you notice that the Intellisense picks it up. All right, and I'm going to say trace dot write I'm in page load now. All right, kind of a dumb thing to say, but just so you see that. All right, file, save my ASPX.cs file, run the program again. Same stuff that you saw before, but one of these lines in here, hopefully, don't make me a liar, please. Unless I did it wrong. Well, then, where was it? Right at the top? Okay, thank you. after begin load. There it is. I'm in page load now. Thank you. So what you might want to do and what you can use that for is you can put this if trace is enabled in different parts of your program. So if I wanted to make sure at page load time a variable was set, I could print it right there. All right? So it is a way of tracing program execution. And also, I can leave those things in there. There's not a problem with leaving that stuff in there. And when I go through this, I'm going to leave that line of code in there. But if I go back to my ASPX file and I just set that to false, or just remove it, either one's going to do the same thing. All right, so that's all I did was I changed it from true to false. All right, so I'm going to save the file, run the program again. Trace is now not enabled, but while I'm trying to show you, so you don't get any errors. So you can leave traces set up in your code. They show you an example in the book. I don't remember where it is, but it's even possible to take that trace output and you can customize that. It was hard for me to see because last time I did it, I did some CSS with it and I made it red, so it stuck out. Most oftentimes that's what you're going to want to do, is do some quick CSS, because otherwise you see, unless you have good eyes like you do, if you've got bad eyes like me, you don't find it that easily. But the bottom line is this, because we're done with a chapter, but the bottom line is this, just so you hear this. What a lot of people do is they keep trace in there all the time, and they have it set to true while they're debugging the program. Once it's done, they just set it to false. All right. Just remember that if you do that and you do decide you're going to leave this stuff in there, then it's available for anybody who can see your code. All right. So it's a decision you have to make. And if you don't have that line of code in there, so I'm just going to remove it. All right. And if I have it turned on or off now, if I have it turned on, you already saw what will happen. If it's turned off, nothing's going to happen. All right. Yeah. The only, well, let's put it this way. 99.999% of the time, no. Because what the end user is going to see when you get all done, you're going to basically do the equivalent of turn this project into a dynamic link library, a DLL file. So they won't be able to see the source, period. All right. But one of the things that we were taught back in the days when I was programming at Bell Labs was we put debug flags in our code all over the place, and we were told to leave our debug stuff in there because they just assumed that eventually it was going to break. And we had tests and stuff that we actually put into our code, but we just turned the debug flags off. Now, that's a security risk because if somebody would have been able to break into it, but that really wasn't, we didn't have the internet back then, etc. And we didn't have, that wasn't the situation, where now it is more of a situation. All right. So that was it. Like I said, okay, 11:21. But that's it. So we have now gone through chapters 1, 2, 3, and 5. And again, what we will do next class on Tuesday is we'll go over chapter 4, which is a little longer chapter. And if you get a chance, you say, well, I don't get a chance to do it, then don't. But if you get the chance, you might want to look at the code or at the, just page through the chapter, because this is the first time they talk about the code. They talk about, it's that multi-page site, so they start to do the beginning of the site for this Halloween Superstore. And they go over the code for the order page and the code for the cart page. And then they also go over the code for the product class, the cart item class, and the cart item list class. We haven't looked at that stuff before. So that's what we'll spend the majority of the time on, is looking at that C# code. All right, and that was it.